News Channel 5 HD.
Please join me in welcoming HJ and his friend James Bradley.
Thank you for inviting me to be a part of your press conference. I'm honored to be here. Please face the flag and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now, please join me in the Rotary 4-way test, which is the things we think, say, and do. First, is it true? Second, is it very long term? Third, will it ever intrusive? Fourth, will it be beneficial long term?
Thank you. Please be seated, resume your meal, and we'll pick back up in a few minutes. Thank you. I'm going to ask you to look at page 14 of your program, and you will see the official biography of our special guest that we know by now is Bill Boyd. But I'm not going to tell you anything from that program. I'm going to think about the fact that we're all Southerners here. And Bill, Southerners do things a little differently. When we meet somebody, we say, "What's your name?" And then, most always, we say, "Where are you from?" And then we say, "Who's your family?" So I thought maybe I could help get some answers to those questions that would help us have a better understanding of Bill Boyd. So his name is, as it says in the program, William B. Boyd. And I'll have to tell you, I don't know what the B stands for, but it's William B. Boyd. And now I tried to find out where he was from, and I noticed that in this biography, it says he's from Botany Downs, and I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Monocawa?
Nobody else will know. It doesn't matter.
Okay, all right. We'll keep going here. But it is from New Zealand. Okay. So I wanted to do some more research on that. And I kept thinking, well, I better go to that fount of knowledge, the internet. So I did a little research, and I started off to say, well, he's from New Zealand, so surely there's something unique or something special about men from New Zealand. And I found, sure enough, there is. It says the stereotypical New Zealand male is essentially a pioneer type. He's rural, unintellectual, strong, unemotional, democratic, has little time for high culture. He's good with animals, particularly horses, and machines. And he's able to turn his hand to nearly anything, and I can see a lot of applicability for that. But I found it also says the stereotypical New Zealander is a hard man. New Zealand men have been stereotyped as strong, unemotional, and prone to violence. So I asked him if it was okay if I took some liberties with his introduction, and he said he would be okay with that. So I'm going to have to watch the prone to violence part. So that's the New Zealand part. And then I looked looked up that town that I couldn't pronounce where it said that he lives, and I found that even though it says it may be rural, that's a pretty good sized town, Bill. It says it's 375,600 people, and the third largest in New Zealand, and the country's fastest growing. So he's not a country boy after all. Well, but I did find something interesting. It says that the town is of, and I think this is called Maori, M-A-O-R-I, with this funny little line over the top of the A. So I thought, well, that's interesting. If it's from Maori origin, I better learn something about Maori. So did a little more research. I found out he actually came before that from a town called Howick or Howick, New Zealand. But it says it has Maori origin. So I thought, well, I'm really on to something here. So this is what I learned about the Maoris. Now, you may know about Maoris. I think of them as the fierce guys with the tattooing all over their faces. But I found that it's true. Maori men are known for their tattoos and their kapa haka dance. Well, I thought, I'm looking at Bill, I don't see any of those tattoos. Well, I found, though, it says that they can also be on the chest or the backside. Well, I've never seen Bill without his shirt, and I certainly haven't seen his backside. So I can't verify that. But here's what it says. It says that the tattoos are the individual's identity cards. It's like their passport. It shows their rank and their status. And here's something interesting. It said if the person is a tattooed person wearing a dog cloak. And Bill, I don't know what a dog cloak is, but I don't see one. But it says that combination means you're a great chief. Well, all I know is that, I don't know, Bill, whether you can do the kapa haka dance, because I read up on it too. It says that this is a cultural dance and that it usually is a war dance. But it says at times it's performed by New Zealanders who are just homesick. So all I can say is I still didn't have that linkage. You know, who's your family? We in the South, we want to find somebody we can find a relationship with. So I thought, well, maybe there's an American that Bill is related to. So I did some more research. And I found that there is a fairly famous person named William Lawrence Boyd, William L. Boyd. I bet most of you don't know William L. Boyd. He's a famous Hollywood actor from the 40s and the early 50s, but he changed his name when he got on the screen. His screen name is Hopalong Cassidy. So, it is my pleasure to introduce a great chief from the land down under of New Zealand. Please stand and help me welcome Bill Boyd.
Now, for a start, I think I have the right to reply. The first thing I've got to say is that I recognise you as Southern gentlemen, but I think I'm more Southern than any of you. Secondly, Lorna has told me that I am not in public to do a haka. Our rugby union team, which is the icon, I guess, of New Zealand sport, usually does a haka before their games against other countries. And it's the haka that was the haka of my old school. But I think she's right. It's not really appropriate for me to do it because I don't have my tattoos. And I do understand that one of the facilitators today took his pants down, but there is no way. You You're not going to find out tonight whether I've got tattoos. But thank you for the welcome. I think you spent too long in your research. It really is. It's a pleasure to be here. The mood of the day has been really very good indeed. And I've been enjoying it. It's nice to be with you. I guess there's an expectation that I'm going to speak about the Rotary Foundation. But I don't need to do it to all those old people around the place here who've been district governors or done any of those sorts of things. I think I really should be talking to the President-elect. When you become president of your club, I hope you're going to take an interest in the Rotary Foundation. I hope you're going to encourage your club members to take an interest. I hope that you make some form of contribution to the foundation, because it really is our foundation. And then if you do that, you should tell your friends and your family that you are supporting the Rotary Foundation. And that's probably going to open up a few questions. So I thought in advance I'd see if I could provide some of the answers. The first question to anybody who doesn't know anything about it is, what is this Rotary Foundation? And I think we can get an answer to that very quickly. There are 1.2 million Rotarians in the world. And those of us who can afford to make our contributions to the Rotary Foundation, so that the Rotary Foundation can, in its turn, support the Rotarians in countries that have the greatest needs, the developing countries, the very poor countries. And in that sense, the foundation really is just a conduit that you use to support those who need support. Along the way, the foundation prioritises the projects to make sure that they are worthy of your money, and it also exercises stewardship over the spending of your money, and you're entitled to have that, because if you give money, you're entitled to know that it will be properly spent. And the foundation is simply that. You don't really give to support the Rotary Foundation. What you do is you give to support the work of the Rotary Foundation. And I think that's very important. So the next question, logically, is, well, that's okay, but what does this Rotary Foundation do? What do Rotarians really get involved in? And you won't have any problems, I would think, in being able to tell of some of the wonderful projects that we undertake in Rotary. I was looking this afternoon at a video called Doing Good in the World that was talking about projects that Rotary does, one in each of the areas of focus, and one of them was a water project in Peru, where two Rotary clubs, one from the States, one from Peru, went into a backward area in Peru to find what they could do to improve the lives of the people. And the answer came back that while we have a river running past our villages, so we have plenty of water, the water is so polluted that it means that our children are always sickly. It really is a major problem for us to have clean water. So the Rotarians said, okay, what we'll do then is we will provide you with some biosand filters so that you can filter the water that you have. But we're not going to send them to you. We're going to train local tradesmen on how to build the filters. and with foundation support, which supplied all the materials, they taught local tradesmen how to build and install biosand filters. And then they took the next step. They said, it's all very well to have the filters, but really we need to talk, particularly to the women in the village, about basic health, sanitation, and how to use the water to best advantage. So they trained a number of the women so that they could do this. And then they called a water expert in to check that the quality of the water was adequate, that it was good. And that's the sort of project that Rotarians get involved in. They identify the real need before they start, because it's very easy if you get emotional about things to see the next major event that happens on the television news and rush off to address that need. But often if you do that, you miss the real need. So we identified the need. We build sustainability into our projects because the local craftsmen built the biosand filters. So if there are any problems, they knew how to fix them. And of course, they left that component of health and sanitation training with the women in the village so that it would be spread through the village. So that's the sort of thing that Rotary does, and Rotary does it pretty well. There was another Rotary Club in the States that worked with a Rotary Club in Jamaica, in St Mary's Parish. Now, St Mary's Parish has a literacy rate of 20%. So you're talking about an area that's got 80% illiteracy and 85% unemployment. And if you put those two things together, you get a pretty good idea of what living conditions are like in St Mary's Parish. And the two Rotary clubs got together and they decided that the biggest difference that they could make was working through the schools. So they started a program of providing a breakfast for children. Now that has two impacts. The first one is it brings the children to school, because if they're going to get fed, they're going to come to school. But if they get fed, then they're capable of learning to a much greater degree. So that was the starting point. But then they realised if we were really to have sustainability in a project like that we had to go a step further. And the schools were in areas that had enough ground around them that they set up a garden plot for every child in the school. And they taught them how to make compost and how to plant seeds. And in Jamaica, where the climate is hot and normally wet, they could produce a crop of vegetables in 90 days. So they went through 2 90-day cycles of working with the young people. And then they said to the young people, now you're going to become the teachers. And with the young people, they went back into the homes of their parents and said, you can grow your own food. That all the issues that you have may still be there, but you can grow your own food. And using the children as the teachers, they taught the parents how to grow food. And that's a good Rotary project too, because they identified a need. They were really initially working on hunger, but it had an impact on education. It would flow over into health. And by teaching the children and the parents, then it built sustainability into the project. So that's the sort of thing that Rotary does. Well, that's fine, but all these good Rotary projects that you talk about, do you get real value for money? Yeah, we can certainly answer that one. We have a program of giving worthy young people the opportunity to do a 2-year course a master's course in peace and conflict resolution. We also have alongside it a 3-month diploma course which takes place in Bangkok in Thailand, which really caters for a different group of people, but also very much involved. It's a very practical course working on peace and conflict resolution. Now we as Rotarians, we paid for an Indian man called Nani Mahanta to go to Bradford University in the UK and to get his degree in peace and conflict resolution. Nani was a university lecturer, and when he went back to his university in Assam, which is a state in the north of India that has its problems, he talked to his professor and said, I think we should do a 6-month course in peace and conflict resolution. So the professor said, yeah, it's worth a try. So they tried, and they were really surprised at the number of students who wanted to study. So they went to the university administration and said, if we'd like to set up a degree course in our university in peace and conflict resolution. And the administration agreed. Nani became an associate professor and takes that course, and every year he graduates 25 master's students in peace and conflict resolution. Now the importance of that story, of course, is that Rotary paid for one person to go to Bradford to study. But because of that gift that we gave, there were 25 more students qualifying every year in peace and conflict resolution. So I think you've got to say that that's good value for money. Actually, I'd like to quote, when you look at value for money, Lorna's experience last year. My wife Lorna, who is probably still sitting in Evanston trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle that Judy June gave her. Lorna had a cataract operation last year, had 2 cataracts removed. The cost in New Zealand dollars was $4,360. I would suspect, from what I'm told, it might cost you significantly more than that in the States. When I went to the International Assembly, I was handed a leaflet, printed leaflet in colour, from a district governor-elect from India who was seeking support for projects in his district. And he had a number of projects, but one of them was for cataract operations in eye camps in India. And the cost of those cataract operations is between $20 and $30 each. You know, just think of giving somebody back their eyesight for $20 or $30. It's just amazing. And the question, I guess, is why is Lorna so expensive when in India they're so cheap? Well, I took Lorna to the specialist, and I'm not sure whether it was a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, but there was something sitting in the car park that was fairly, quite upmarket. And of course, it was a lovely building, and there was a receptionist, and there were nice magazines to read, and she got a cup of tea after the operation, and all of those sorts of things. And in India, you would be probably, after your operation, on the floor, lying on the ground. But if you've been given your eyesight, isn't it worth it? And so yeah, Rotary does give value for money. And I said when we talked about projects that Rotary identifies the real needs. And I think we're pretty good at that. I went to a conference, a presidential conference in Manila in the Philippines, and they had breakouts. And probably my 2 greatest passions in Rotary service are water and literacy. So I decided I'd go to the literacy workshop that they had. And I sat next to an American Rotarian who was working in the southern area in a smallish town in the Philippines. And we got to talking, and he said, when I first went into our town, there were 3 preschools. And he said they're very, very ordinary. They have no water, no electricity, and the sanitation is basically a pit out in the yard. So I said to my Rotary Club, I'll tell you what, how about we rebuild those 3 preschools? And I'll contact my old club in the States and I'll ask if they'd like to make a contribution to the cost, and I think we can put together a project at that time. So the club called the teachers from the preschools to a club meeting, and they announced what they intended to do. They intended to rebuild the preschools. The teachers sort of went to one side of the room and talked amongst themselves, and they came back and said, can we please tell you what is our #1 priority? And the Rotarian said, yes, certainly. They said, what we need more than anything else is books. And my new American friend said, as he thought through that, he realised what they were saying, that for their young people to have a chance, they would have to have an education. And the starting point of education would be literacy, and it would come from books. And he told me from that point forward he had always supported literacy projects, and that's why he was in the literacy workshop. So yes, we can identify the real needs. I went to an institute in India 2 years ago and talked to a district governor-elect who told me that he had been his club president in 2004-05. Now that major tsunami on Boxing Day on December 26, 2004 was just off Indonesia, and it really made huge damage through Indonesia. It also hit a little bit of the coast of Thailand. It hit Sri Lanka very hard, but also much more of the coastline of India than I'd ever appreciated. I didn't realise it had been caught in the tsunami. So this governor-elect said to me, we wondered what we could do to help. And he said, we heard that there were 2 other clubs that were rebuilding fishing villages. And we thought that would be a good thing to do. So we made inquiries and heard of this fishing village, which had basically been demolished because the tsunami came through. And he said, we all went down together and we said, we are Rotarians and we give service and we do good for people, and we've come because we're going to rebuild your village. And he said the fishermen themselves sort of looked at each other, and then they went off and they talked amongst each other, and they came back and they said, you know what we really need are nets and boats, and we will rebuild our own village. And there's that saying that you probably all heard about give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Well, this, I think, is the practical demonstration. You give us nets and boats, and we will rebuild our own village. If the people you're talking to have read very much about what happens in the world of aid in these days, they'll have come across what is currently the buzzword, and that's sustainability. And it's there in our future vision plans. Because we've come to realise that it's all very well to address symptoms, but you really need to address causes and do projects that really have a long-term effect. So the question is, do you build sustainability into your projects? Well, yeah, we're pretty good at that too. In Fiji, we have a Rotary Fiji Water Trust, which is an ongoing trust. And in their last report, they reported that they had given a permanent water supply to something like 54,000 people. And they'd spent about 800,000 doing it, half of which had come from the Rotary Foundation, most of the rest from the 4 biggest companies in Fiji, which together were supporting the activity. If you are a CPA, you've probably already worked out that's about $15 per head. For the rest of us, I can tell you that it is. And that's not necessarily cheap with water projects, because we can often produce at a lower price, but it just depends on the circumstances and how far you've got to move the water and those sorts of things. So they called on the services of a gentleman working in the University of the South Pacific who acts as an advisor to the European Union and to the United Nations on water projects, and asked him if he would check the projects out to see how sustainable they were. And he came back and said, I would rate your projects as 89.5% sustainable. Now, you may be disappointed that he didn't say 100%, but I think you've got to realise that we don't get it totally right all the time, we just get it right. And you've got to compare that to the fact that according to UNICEF, there are 4 countries in Africa where 65% of the water projects fail. Now, as Rotarians, I just don't think we could ever tolerate a failure rate of 65%. So that 89.5% success rate in Fiji really is right up there with water projects. And they're sustainable, because that's what he was asked to check. It's all very well for you to give your money, but do other people support the foundation? Well, yes, other people do support the foundation. There's a gentleman called John Jern who talks about polio fundraising and polio eradication. And he talked today about Bill Gates and what Bill Gates has given to Rotary. Now, I was sitting at the table at the lunch, and it just happened that I had the opportunity to meet with the number 3 man in the Gates Foundation to negotiate that 50 million. It wasn't going to be me, actually, it was going to be John Jern, but he'd left his passport at home. And so he couldn't go to Canada. And I was the chair-elect, and the chair was Colin Stenhammer, and he had an important meeting that he had to attend in Sweden, so it couldn't be him, so it fell upon me. Tashi Yamada, who was head of all the health programs in the Gates Foundation, was just a total gentleman. Now, you wouldn't meet a nicer guy, and we discussed what was a fair thing and whether Rotary could make a contribution, and we said we can't match. In fact, the only money we could get would probably be out of our reserves. We worked on a 5-to-1 match. They would give us 50 million, we would find 10 million in our reserves. But the important comment that I made when we were talking at the table was that we talked over lunch, and at the end of the lunch we stood up and we shook hands, and the deal was done. And the eventual exchange of letters were about 1.5 pages long. None of these long, lengthy contracts, because our relationship with the Gates Foundation was basically a letter of intent going each way, and that was good enough. And they work on handshakes. And that says a lot about Rotary, how they believe in and trust in us. It's taken them over the 400 million mark. It's a lot of money, but they trust us. But it's not just people like the Gates Foundation who support us. We've got a lady in India called Mrs. Verma, big and it's strong. It's one of the major companies in India. And they established the Birla Foundation. Mrs. Birla decided that she would give us $250,000 and become a member of the Arts Club Society. So she came to Evanston to be inducted into the Arts Club Society. And as happens with all of you who become Arts Club Society members, you're given the opportunity to spend a day with Star, looking at what the foundation does. So that when it came to the presentation, Mrs. Birla was named and she got up and went to the microphone and she said, I have been very impressed by what I have seen today. And so I've decided that rather than give you $250,000, I'm going to make it $1 million. She has now given us $5.2 million, and she's not a Rotarian. So Mrs. Birla believes in what we do. There was an interesting sidelight there. She said, I have a friend called Mrs. Middle, and I'll go and talk to Mrs. Middle. Now, the Middle family owns Asador Steel, which is probably the world's biggest steel company. They were the biggest in India, and then they bought a major company out in the European Union, and it was in the press for a while because the European Union wasn't sure whether they'd allow it to go ahead, but they did. So Mrs. Birla went to see Mrs. Middle, and Mrs. Middle wrote out a cheque for $1 million to our Rotary Foundation because they believe in what our Rotary Foundation is doing. So yes, we give our money to the foundation, we're in good company. I'll tell you something that probably reflects a little bit on the chairman of the foundation. That the Rotarians in Taiwan have been very significant supporters of our Arts Club Society. In fact, from 19,000 Rotarians, they have 27 Arts Club Society members. There's one club called Taipei Castle that's got 3 Arts Club Society members. So if you want to challenge this present club, there's a good one going forward.